I thought I had the perfect marriage. My name is Patricia Wilson, and for 3 years I believed I was living a fairy tale with my husband, Michael Thompson. We had everything: a beautiful home that I inherited from my parents, financial security, and what I thought was unconditional love. Michael was attentive, caring, always making sure I was comfortable and well taken care of. My stepbrother David still lived with us in the family estate, and the three of us seemed like the perfect little family unit. But looking back now, I can see how perfectly orchestrated everything was, how every loving gesture was actually a carefully calculated move in a game I didn't even know I was playing. It started about 6 months ago with little things. I'd wake up feeling groggy, forgetting conversations I was sure I'd had the day before. Michael would gently remind me, "Honey, don't you remember? We talked about this last night." His voice was always so patient, so understanding. When I'd reach for my phone to call my best friend Jennifer Martinez, he'd softly suggest, "Maybe you should rest instead. You've been so tired lately." The memory lapses got worse. I'd find myself standing in rooms with no recollection of why I'd gone there. Simple tasks became overwhelming. Reading a book felt like trying to decode a foreign language. Michael's concern grew with each passing day, and honestly, so did mine. Something was seriously wrong with me, and I had no idea what. "I think we should see Dr. Harrison," Michael suggested one morning as I struggled to remember what day it was. "He's a specialist. He'll know what's going on with these episodes you've been having." Dr. Harrison was Michael's choice, of course. A distinguished older man with kind eyes and a reassuring voice. After a series of tests and consultations, he delivered what felt like a life sentence: early-onset dementia with severe anxiety complications. The words hit me like a physical blow. At 32, I was losing my mind. "The good news," Dr. Harrison explained, "is that we caught it early. With the right medication and care, we can slow the progression significantly." He handed Michael a prescription for something called haloperidol, along with detailed instructions about dosage and timing. Michael transformed into the perfect caregiver overnight. He'd wake me gently each morning with my pills and a glass of water. "Time for your medicine, sweetheart," he'd say, watching carefully as I swallowed each tablet. He took over all our financial responsibilities, explaining that numbers and paperwork were too stressful for my condition. He fielded phone calls from friends and family, always with the same gentle explanation. "Patricia isn't feeling well enough for visitors right now, but I'll tell her you called." I became increasingly isolated, but Michael assured me it was for my own good. "You need to focus on getting better," he'd say, stroking my hair as I lay confused and exhausted on the couch. "I'll handle everything else. That's what husbands are for." David, my stepbrother, seemed genuinely worried about my condition. He'd check on me throughout the day, bringing me tea and sitting with me when Michael was at work. Sometimes I'd catch him and Michael having hushed conversations in the kitchen, but when I asked about it, they'd just say they were discussing my care plan or upcoming doctor appointments. The medication made everything worse. My thoughts felt wrapped in cotton, my limbs heavy and unresponsive. Simple conversations became exhausting. I'd start to say something and forget what I was talking about mid-sentence. Michael was endlessly patient, finishing my thoughts and speaking for me when words wouldn't come. "The doctors say this is normal," he'd explain to concerned relatives during the rare phone calls I was allowed to take. "The medication can cause some confusion initially, but it's helping with the underlying condition." 3 months into my treatment, I was a shadow of my former self. The vibrant, independent woman who had inherited substantial property and investments from my parents had become a docile, dependent patient who couldn't remember what she'd eaten for breakfast. Michael managed everything: my medications, my schedule, my finances, my social connections. I signed whatever papers he put in front of me, trusting his explanations that they were insurance forms or medical authorizations. But despite the fog in my brain, some deep instinct kept whispering that something wasn't right. Maybe it was the way Michael's eyes would light up when he thought I wasn't looking, or how quickly David would change the subject when I asked about my old friends. There were moments of clarity, brief windows where the medication seemed to wear thin, and in those moments I felt like I was drowning and everyone around me was watching me sink. The phone call that changed everything happened on a Tuesday afternoon in late October. Michael had called during his lunch break, as he did every day, to check on me and remind me about my evening medication. "Hi, sweetheart, how are you feeling today?" His voice was warm, concerned, exactly what a loving husband should sound like. "Better, I think," I managed, though even forming the words felt difficult. "Still tired, but better." "That's wonderful to hear. Did you remember to take your morning pills?" "Yes, David helped me." "Good. I'll be home around 6. Make sure you take your evening dose at 5, okay? And try to eat something. You're getting too thin." "I will. I love you, Michael." "I love you too, Patricia. More than you'll ever know." The line should have gone dead there. That's how all our calls ended, with declarations of love and Michael's promise to take care of me. But this time, something was different. I heard the distinctive sound of the phone being set down, but not the click of disconnection. For 30 seconds there was silence, and I was about to hang up when I heard something that made my blood freeze in my veins. Michael's laughter. Not the warm, gentle laugh I was used to, but something cold and calculating. Then I heard my stepbrother David's voice, clear as day. "She actually believes you. The meds are working perfectly. Soon she won't even trust her own name." My heart stopped. The phone trembled in my hand as Michael's voice joined the conversation. "Dr. Harrison says another month on this dosage should do it. Once we get her declared mentally incompetent, the inheritance transfer will be seamless. She's already signed half the preliminary paperwork thinking it was insurance forms." And the best part, David's voice was filled with sick amusement, is that she's so grateful for our care. She has no idea we're slowly erasing her mind. "The beauty of haloperidol," Michael continued, "is that it mimics dementia symptoms perfectly. Long-term use can cause permanent cognitive damage, but we won't need long-term, just enough to get her signature on the final documents." I dropped the phone like it was burning my flesh. The room spun around me, but for the first time in months, my mind felt crystal clear. The medication that was supposed to be treating my dementia was actually causing it. The loving husband who held me while I cried about my failing memory was the one systematically destroying it. The inheritance my parents had left me, their life's work, their legacy, was being stolen while I was too drugged to understand what was happening. Sitting on my bedroom floor with the phone beside me, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. Michael had never loved me. David had never cared about my well-being. They saw me as nothing more than an obstacle between them and my family's money, and they were so confident in their plan, so sure of my helplessness, that they didn't even bother to make sure their calls were private. But they had made one crucial mistake. For the first time in months, I was completely, absolutely awake. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I didn't take my medication. Instead, I palmed the pills when Michael handed them to me and pretended to swallow them with my usual compliant confusion. As soon as he left for work, I flushed them down the toilet and waited. By noon, my head felt clearer than it had in half a year. By evening, I could think in complete sentences again. But I was smart enough to know that showing improvement would be dangerous. So I maintained my act. I shuffled when they expected shuffling, forgot things when they expected confusion, and spoke in the same halting, medicated voice they were used to hearing. To Michael and David, I was still their perfect victim, drugged, docile, and completely under their control. What they didn't know was that I was documenting everything, every conversation, every medical appointment, every financial document they thought I was signing blindly. I had managed to retrieve my old phone from a drawer in my bedroom, a device they'd convinced me was too complicated for my condition. Using my clearest moments, I began recording their conversations when they thought I was napping or too medicated to understand. The recordings were devastating. Michael bragging to David about how easy it had been to find a corrupt doctor willing to misdiagnose me. David calculating how they'd split my inheritance once the legal proceedings were complete. Discussions about dosage adjustments and timing, treating my mental capacity like a faucet they could turn on and off at will. I also started reaching out carefully to people from my past. Jennifer Martinez, my college roommate who had tried calling several times only to be told I was too unwell for visitors. She was shocked to hear from me directly, and even more shocked when I told her what I'd discovered. "Patricia, this is insane," she whispered during our secret phone call while Michael was at work. "We need to call the police right now." "Not yet," I told her, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I need more evidence, and I need to make sure they can't destroy what I already have." With Jennifer's help, I contacted my parents' old lawyer, Mr. Anderson, who had handled their estate. When I explained the situation, his voice turned ice-cold professional. "Mrs. Thompson, if what you're telling me is true, this constitutes fraud, conspiracy, and attempted theft on a massive scale. We need to move very carefully, but we need to move fast." Over the next 2 weeks, I built my case with the methodical precision that my clear mind allowed. I obtained copies of my real medical records, consulted with an independent psychiatrist who confirmed I showed no signs of dementia, and worked with Mr. Anderson to understand exactly what documents I had unknowingly signed and which could be reversed. The hardest part was maintaining my act at home. Watching Michael tenderly stroke my hair while discussing with David how much longer they'd need to keep drugging me. Listening to them make plans for after Patricia's condition progresses, while I sat 3 feet away, pretending to be lost in medication-induced confusion. But with each passing day, I felt my strength returning. Not just mentally, but emotionally. The fear and helplessness that had consumed me for months was transforming into something much more powerful: determination. They had tried to steal not just my money, but my identity, my autonomy, my very sense of self. They had made me doubt my own reality while they systematically destroyed it. They thought they were so clever, so careful. They thought they had accounted for every variable except one. They had underestimated who I really was. Under all that medication, under all that manipulation, I was still Patricia Wilson. I was still my parents' daughter, and I was about to remind them exactly what that meant. By the end of the 3rd week, I had everything I needed: medical evidence, audio recordings, financial documentation, and a legal team ready to act. Michael and David continued their daily routine, checking on their drugged, helpless victim and planning their future with my money. What they didn't know was that I had planned their future for them instead. And unlike their plan, mine was going to succeed. The moment I had been preparing for arrived on a crisp Friday evening in November. 3 weeks and 2 days since I'd stopped taking the medication that was supposed to be healing me but was actually destroying my mind. 3 weeks and 2 days since I'd heard Michael and David plotting my mental and financial destruction through that forgotten phone call. Tonight, they would walk into their doom, just as I had planned. I had suggested the dinner myself, playing the role of the grateful, confused wife one final time. "Michael," I had said that morning, my voice carrying the same halting quality they expected. "I want to cook dinner tonight, to thank you and David for taking such good care of me." I had let my eyes well up with tears, the way they always did when the medication made me emotional. "I know I haven't been myself lately, but I want you both to know how much I appreciate everything." Michael had kissed my forehead tenderly, the same gesture he'd made hundreds of times while slowly poisoning me. "That's so sweet of you, honey. Are you sure you're up for it? Cooking can be overwhelming when you're not feeling well." "I want to try," I had insisted. "Maybe I could invite a few people? Mr. Anderson from Dad's old law firm has been asking about me. And Dr. Roberts. You know, the family doctor who treated me before all this started. I'd like them to see that I'm getting better." The suggestion had made David shift uncomfortably, but Michael's response was exactly what I'd expected. His narcissism wouldn't allow him to refuse what looked like a perfect opportunity to demonstrate his devoted husband act to outsiders. "Of course, sweetheart. If that's what you want, I'll help you arrange everything." What Michael didn't know was that I had already arranged everything. Mr. Anderson knew exactly why he was being invited, as did Dr. Roberts and the 3rd guest I had requested, Detective Williams from the local police department, whom I had introduced as a family friend who's been checking on me since Mom and Dad passed away. The table was set for 6 people by 5 o'clock. The good china that had belonged to my grandmother, the silver candlesticks my parents had received as wedding gifts, the crystal glasses that caught the light and threw rainbows across the dining room walls. Everything looked perfect, exactly as it should for what I had told my guests would be a celebration of my recovery. Michael arrived home at his usual time, whistling softly as he hung up his coat. "Something smells amazing," he called out, and I could hear the genuine pleasure in his voice. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for how completely unprepared he was for what was coming. Almost. "I made your favorite," I called back, my voice carrying just enough tremor to maintain the illusion. "Beef Wellington." It took me all afternoon, but I think I remembered the recipe correctly. David emerged from his room looking unusually well-dressed. He had put on a button-down shirt and dress pants, clearly wanting to make a good impression on our guests. "You really outdid yourself, Patricia," he said, giving me what I now recognized as his practiced, concerned brother smile. "Are you sure you didn't overdo it? You look tired." "I'm fine," I assured him, smoothing down my blue dress. The one Michael always said brought out my eyes. "Just nervous about having people over. It's been so long since I've felt well enough for dinner parties." The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock. Mr. Anderson arrived first, distinguished and professional in his charcoal suit. He greeted Michael and David with polite handshakes, asking after my health with the concern of an old family friend. Dr. Roberts came next, carrying a small bouquet of flowers and wearing the kind smile I remembered from my childhood checkups. Detective Williams arrived last, casual in khakis and a polo shirt, looking exactly like someone who might stop by to check on a family friend. "Thank you all so much for coming," I said as we gathered in the living room for drinks. My hands shook slightly as I poured wine, not from nerves, but from the effort of maintaining my act when every cell in my body was screaming for justice. It means the world to me to have such caring people in my life during this difficult time. Michael slipped his arm around my waist, pulling me close in a gesture that would have seemed loving to anyone who didn't know the truth. "Patricia's been working so hard on her recovery," he told our guests. "Some days are better than others, but seeing her cook dinner tonight and organize this gathering, it gives me so much hope." "The medical team has been amazing," David added, settling into his role as the concerned family member. "Dr. Harrison especially. He's been so patient with all of Patricia's questions and confusion about her treatment plan." I watched Detective Williams make a mental note of the doctor's name, just as I had known he would. Every word they spoke was digging their grave deeper, and they had no idea. Dinner conversation flowed smoothly for the first hour. Michael regaled our guests with stories about my progress, carefully describing symptoms that painted me as someone whose grip on reality was tenuous at best. David chimed in with observations about my daily struggles, how I sometimes forgot conversations we'd had or became confused about simple tasks. "It's been challenging," Michael said, cutting his beef with practiced elegance. "But Patricia is fighting so hard. Some days she's almost her old self, and other days—" He let the sentence hang, shaking his head with practiced sorrow. "The medication seems to be helping, though," David offered. "Dr. Harrison adjusted the dosage last month, and we've seen real improvement since then." Dr. Roberts leaned forward with interest. "What medication is she on, if you don't mind my asking? I've been working with several dementia patients lately, and I'm always curious about different treatment approaches." "Haloperidol," Michael answered without hesitation. Dr. Harrison felt it was the most effective option for Patricia's particular symptoms. The silence that followed was brief but telling. Dr. Roberts' eyebrows rose slightly, and I saw Mr. Anderson exchange a quick glance with Detective Williams. Haloperidol wasn't a dementia medication. It was an antipsychotic typically used for severe mental illness, and its side effects included exactly the symptoms I had been experiencing. "That's interesting," Dr. Roberts said carefully. "I don't usually see haloperidol prescribed for cognitive decline. It's more commonly used for—" Dr. Harrison explained that Patricia's case is complex. Michael interrupted smoothly. "The anxiety component required a more aggressive approach." I set down my wine glass, and the soft clink against the table seemed unnaturally loud in the suddenly tense room. "Actually," I said, my voice stronger and clearer than it had been in months, "I'd like to talk about Dr. Harrison." Michael's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. To our guests, it probably looked supportive. I knew it was a warning. Honey, maybe we shouldn't bore everyone with medical details. No, I think our friends should know the truth about my treatment. I stood up slowly, feeling every eye in the room focus on me, especially since they've been so concerned about my health. David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Patricia, are you feeling all right? You seem a little agitated. I feel clearer than I have in months, I said, walking to the sideboard where I had placed a small digital recorder. In fact, I've been feeling much better since I stopped taking my medication 3 weeks ago. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Michael's face went very still, and David actually stopped chewing, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. What do you mean, stopped taking your medication? Michael's voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the edge underneath. Patricia, you know how important it is to maintain your treatment schedule. You're right, I agreed, picking up the recorder and holding it in my hands like a precious treasure. It is important to maintain treatment, but only when the treatment is actually meant to help you get better. I pressed play, and Michael's voice filled the dining room with crystal clarity. She actually believes you. The meds are working perfectly. Soon she won't even trust her own name. The effect was immediate and devastating. David's fork clattered to his plate, and all the color drained from Michael's face. He started to stand, his mouth opening to speak, but David's voice from the recording cut him off. Dr. Harrison says another month on this dosage should do it. Once we get her declared mentally incompetent, the inheritance transfer will be seamless. Patricia, Michael's voice was now openly desperate. You're not well. You're having another episode. This is exactly the kind of paranoid thinking that— That what? I interrupted, pressing stop on the recorder. That proves I'm crazy? That proves I need more medication? I looked around to the table at our guests, who were staring at Michael and David with expressions of horror and disgust. Would you like to hear the rest? There's over 2 hours of recordings. They discuss everything. The fake diagnosis, the corrupt doctor, how they plan to divide my inheritance once they have me declared incompetent. Detective Williams was already reaching for his phone. Mrs. Thompson, I think we need to continue this conversation at the station. No, David said suddenly, his voice cracking with panic. No, this is insane. Patricia, you've been sick for months. You're confused. You're not thinking clearly. We've been trying to help you. Help me? I laughed, and the sound surprised me with its strength. You've been drugging me with antipsychotics while telling everyone I have dementia. You've isolated me from my friends, taken control of my finances, and planned to steal everything my parents left me. That's not help, David. That's called criminal conspiracy. Michael made one last desperate attempt to control the narrative. Dr. Harrison will confirm Patricia's diagnosis. She's been showing signs of paranoid delusions for weeks. This recording could be fabricated or taken out of context during one of her episodes. Actually, Mr. Anderson spoke for the first time since dinner began, his voice carrying the authority of 40 years in law. I took the liberty of contacting Dr. Harrison this afternoon. It seems he's no longer in practice. His medical license was suspended 2 months ago for prescribing controlled substances without proper documentation. Funny thing about that timing. The fight went out of both of them like air from punctured balloons. Michael slumped back in his chair, his hands trembling as the reality of his situation hit him. David actually started crying, tears streaming down his face as he realized that their perfect plan had become their perfect downfall. I want to thank you all for being here tonight, I said, looking around to the table at my guests. Not just for dinner, but for being witnesses to the truth. For 3 months, these men convinced me that I was losing my mind. They made me doubt my own memories, my own perceptions, my own worth. They took a woman who inherited substantial assets and turned her into a confused, dependent patient who couldn't even remember what day it was. Detective Williams stood up, his hand moving to the handcuffs on his belt. Michael Thompson, David Wilson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and assault with a dangerous substance. She's 32, David protested through his tears. It's not elder abuse. Financial abuse of a vulnerable adult, Detective Williams corrected. The charges will be extensive. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Michael looked at me with something I had never seen in his eyes before: genuine emotion. Not love, not even anger, but a kind of bewildered respect. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. 3 weeks and 2 days, I told him. "Since you forgot to hang up the phone after telling me you loved me." The irony wasn't lost on any of us. The man who had spent months controlling every detail of my life, monitoring every phone call and every conversation, had been undone by his own carelessness. One moment of inattention had unraveled months of careful planning. As Detective Williams led them away, David turned back one last time. "Patricia, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. It was Michael's idea. You just wanted my money," I finished for him. "Both of you. And you were willing to destroy my mind to get it." After they were gone, the 4 of us remaining sat in silence for several minutes. The dining room that had been filled with laughter and conversation now felt hollow, echoing with the weight of what had just transpired. "What happens now?" I asked Mr. Anderson. "Now we clean up the mess they made," he replied, pulling out a thick folder of documents. "We'll need to reverse any financial transactions they made without your informed consent, restore your access to your accounts, and ensure that Dr. Harrison faces criminal charges along with Michael and David." Dr. Roberts reached across the table and took my hand. "Patricia, I want you to know that you show absolutely no signs of dementia or cognitive decline. What you experienced was chemically induced, and now that you're off the haloperidol, your cognitive function should return to normal completely." "It already has," I told him. "It's amazing how clear everything becomes when people stop poisoning you." Detective Williams returned an hour later with updates. Michael and David had been processed and were being held without bail pending their arraignment. Dr. Harrison had been arrested at his home and was facing multiple charges related to his practice. The investigation would likely uncover other victims. I wasn't the first person he had helped to treat into mental incompetence. "There's something else you should know," Detective Williams told me as he prepared to leave. "When we searched your husband's phone, we found evidence that he's been planning this for over a year. He married you specifically to gain access to your inheritance." The words should have hurt more than they did, but sitting in my ancestral home, surrounded by the belongings my parents had lovingly chosen and the memories they had helped create, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. "He never loved me at all," I said, and it wasn't a question. "No," Detective Williams confirmed gently. "I don't think he did." "Good," I replied, surprising everyone in the room, including myself. Because the woman he thought he was marrying, the helpless, trusting victim who would hand over everything without question, she never existed either. That night, alone in my house for the first time in 3 years, I walked through every room and reclaimed my space. I threw away every bottle of medication, every medical document signed by Dr. Harrison, every reminder of the months when I had believed I was losing my mind. I called Jennifer Martinez and talked until dawn, telling her everything and crying tears that were equal parts grief and relief. Over the following weeks, my life transformed in ways I hadn't thought possible. The criminal trial became a sensation in the local media, a cautionary tale about financial abuse and the vulnerability of trust. Michael and David each received sentences of 15 to 20 years, and Dr. Harrison lost his medical license permanently, along with a 10-year prison term. But more importantly, I began to rebuild the woman I had been before they tried to erase her. I reconnected with friends I hadn't spoken to in months, resumed managing my own finances, and started making decisions about my future based on what I wanted rather than what someone else told me I needed. The inheritance my parents left me wasn't just money and property, it was freedom. Freedom to choose my own path, to trust my own judgment, to build relationships based on genuine affection rather than calculated manipulation. Michael and David had tried to steal that freedom, but in the end, they had only made me more aware of its value. 6 months after that dinner party, I received a letter from Michael in prison. He wanted to apologize, he said, and to explain that he had never meant for things to go as far as they did. He hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive him someday. I read the letter once, then burned it in the fireplace my parents had used every winter when I was growing up. Some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness, and some people don't deserve second chances. Michael had shown me exactly who he was when he thought I was too drugged to understand. I believed him the first time. Today, I live alone in the house my parents built, but I'm not lonely. I've learned the difference between being alone and being isolated, between independence and abandonment. I've also learned to trust myself again, my instincts, my memories, my perceptions of reality. Sometimes people ask me how I found the strength to fight back, how I managed to turn the tables on people who seemed to hold all the power. The answer is simple. They made one crucial mistake. They thought that loving someone made you weak, that trust made you vulnerable, that caring made you a target. They were wrong. Love, real love, not the manipulative imitation Michael offered. Love makes you strong. It makes you fight for what matters. And what mattered wasn't the money or the house or even my own freedom. What mattered was ensuring that no one else would suffer what I had suffered, that justice would be served, and that the people who had tried to erase Patricia Wilson would learn that she was far more resilient than they had ever imagined. I never did trust people less after everything that happened. Instead, I learned to trust myself more, and that, I think, is the most important lesson of all.